Welcome to Quiet Clues, soft-spoken stories to slow the mind, ease the breath, and gently guide you toward rest. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Let your shoulders drop, let your jaw soften, and before we begin, write down in the comments where in the world you're listening from tonight. And if you wish, what's on your mind? I read every note and love keeping quiet company across distances. If this brings you peace, a like and subscribe will help me make more nightbound stories. Now, breathe in slowly and out. Good. The Whispering Manor, a cozy British mystery inspired by Miss Marple. Chapter 1. Arrival in the Village. The first light of dawn spilled gently over the sleepy village of Elderwood. Mist curled around the cobblestones, softening the edges of the cottages and turning the distant church spire into a faint silhouette. The air was crisp, carrying with it the earthy scent of dew-soaked grass and the faint sweetness of winter berries. Miss Marple, with her familiar shawl draped neatly over her shoulders, walked slowly along the main street. Her eyes, sharp yet gentle, observed each detail: the tilt of the bakery sign, the neat rows of windows in the village inn, the soft smoke curling from chimneys. She paused a moment, adjusting her gloves, and listened. The village was quiet, save for the distant crow of a rooster and the soft rustle of leaves in the early breeze. Beyond the village, winding paths led to the sprawling estate of Ashford Manor. The manor itself stood at the crest of a gentle hill, its stone walls streaked with ivy and age, windows glinting faintly in the early light. Miss Marple's steps slowed as she admired the meticulous gardens now resting in the quiet of winter. The hedges, trimmed with precision, looked almost like sentinels guarding the secrets within. She noted the manor's front door, heavy oak, polished yet bearing the marks of decades, a brass knocker shaped like a lion's head gleaming faintly, a faint scent of wood polish and something sweeter, perhaps the lingering aroma of flowers from the previous summer, floated on the crisp air. As she approached the manor, Miss Marple observed the small movements of the estate's inhabitants. A gardener, bundled against the chill, was sweeping fallen leaves with quiet diligence. A young maid glanced from a window, curiosity bright in her eyes, before disappearing into the manor's interior. Miss Marple's own thoughts drifted. "There is something about this place," she murmured to herself, "something that hides behind civility and polished floors." Her gaze lingered on a faint shadow moving behind a curtained window. Nothing was certain, yet nothing escaped her notice. The front door opened with a welcoming creak. Miss Marple stepped inside, greeted by the faint warmth of the hearth and the subdued scent of lavender and aged wood. The entrance hall was grand yet cozy, polished floors reflecting the glow of the fireplace, tapestries depicting quiet countryside scenes, and a staircase whose carved banister gleamed under the rumbre morning light. "Good morning, Miss Marple," said a soft, polite voice. The housekeeper, a slender woman with sharp eyes softened by years of experience, inclined her head. "Tea has been laid in the morning room as you requested." Miss Marple smiled gently, her fingers brushing the edge of a tapestry. "Thank you, Mrs. Pembroke. It seems the manor keeps its secrets well, but I shall uncover them in time." Miss Marple made her way to the morning room, settling into a high-backed chair near the fireplace. Outside, the morning mist lingered, veiling the gardens in an ethereal hush. She poured herself a cup of tea, inhaling its gentle warmth, letting her mind wander over the possibilities of the day ahead. Though the village seemed tranquil, she knew better. Human nature, she thought, seldom conformed to appearances. In time, the stories hidden behind polite nods and gentle smiles would surface, and she would be ready to listen. Miss Marple spent the morning observing quietly. She noticed the way the curtains swayed in a breeze she could not feel, the subtle creak of floorboards in rooms not yet visited, the faintest echoes of voices in corridors empty of life. Every detail mattered, every sound was a potential clue, and as the sun climbed higher, its pale rays filtering through the frost-speckled windows, she felt it, the whisper of a mystery beginning to stir just beyond the comfort of the manor's walls. Chapter 2. Village Whispers and the Mysterious Letter. By mid-morning, Miss Marple decided to walk back into the village. Elderwood seemed quieter now, the streets bathed in soft winter sunlight. Frost sparkled like tiny diamonds on the thatched roofs, and the air smelled faintly of baking bread from the bakery on the corner. She paused at the fountain in the village square, noting the way the water trickled with a thin layer of ice forming along its edges. Villagers moved about, exchanging nods and murmured greetings. Yet behind polite smiles there was always more than met the eye, and Miss Marple's sharp eyes caught the faintest glances, the subtle shifts in posture. Miss Marple entered the small general store, its wooden floorboards creaking softly beneath her steps. The shopkeeper, a stout man with twinkling eyes, looked up from behind the counter. "Good morning, Miss Marple," he said, his voice cheerful yet tinged with curiosity. "It's not often we see new faces around here." "Good morning," she replied warmly, her fingers lightly brushing the edge of the counter. "I am here to rest for a while, and perhaps to observe a little. There is a certain charm in quiet villages, wouldn't you agree?" He chuckled softly, glancing at the other villagers gathering in hushed conversation near the window. "Indeed, though, as you'll find, Elderwood is rarely as quiet as it seems." As Miss Marple left the shop, she noticed whispers floating from one corner of the square to another. Villagers leaned toward each other, speaking in tones that were just above breath. Something had clearly unsettled the village, though no one seemed willing to voice it openly. Miss Marple made a mental note of the faces and expressions. The young baker wiping flour from his hands nervously, the elderly widow peering over her spectacles with a knowing frown, the innkeeper adjusting a painting on the wall as if to hide something. Small details, subtle gestures, all were threads of a story waiting to be unraveled. Returning to Ashford Manor, Miss Marple found a small envelope resting delicately on the morning room table. The handwriting was neat, almost too careful, and the wax seal bore an unfamiliar crest, a swirling design resembling the waves of a distant sea. She carefully broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The words were few, precise, yet heavy with implication. "The past has returned. Watch closely and trust no one completely." Miss Marple's fingers lingered over the paper. Even a simple note could conceal far more than it revealed. Seated again in her high-backed chair, Miss Marple sipped her tea slowly, letting her mind wander through the possibilities the letter suggested. Who had sent it? Was it a prank or a warning? And what past had returned to disturb the peaceful village? Her gaze drifted to the window, where the frost still clung stubbornly to the panes. Outside, the garden seemed untouched, serene, yet something lingered beneath that calm surface. The manor, the village, even the quiet footsteps of the servants, all seemed imbued with secrets waiting for her careful attention. Later that day, she met with Mrs. Pembroke, the housekeeper, who seemed unusually hesitant. I don't know if I should mention it, Miss Marple," she said, wringing her hands, "but there have been strange noises at night. Footsteps, whispers, doors opening on their own." Miss Marple nodded, a gentle smile curving her lips. "Thank you for telling me. Every detail, however small, is important. You need not worry. We shall observe carefully." She spent the afternoon walking through the halls of the manor, noting creaking floorboards, the subtle shifts of light through curtained windows, and the faint scent of lavender mingled with something more elusive, perhaps old wood, or the faint memory of past events. As evening descended, the village and the manor alike were wrapped in a gentle quiet. Miss Marple stood by the window watching the first stars emerge through a thinning fog. She allowed herself a small, thoughtful sigh. "This village," she murmured softly, "has its secrets, and someone wishes to see them uncovered, or perhaps hidden even further. Patience will reveal the truth." She settled back into her chair by the fire, the letter now safely tucked beside her. Outside, the wind carried a soft, haunting whisper through the trees, like the distant echo of a story long forgotten but not yet finished. Chapter 3. The First Night. Whispers and shadows. The sun sank slowly behind the hills, casting a soft amber glow over Elderwood. Ashford Manor, perched atop its gentle rise, seemed transformed in the fading light. Shadows stretched across the garden, curling around statues and hedges, as if the very earth were whispering secrets. Miss Marple lingered near the window in her room, her shawl drawn tightly around her shoulders. The distant toll of the church bell marked the hour, each chime echoing like a gentle reminder that the day had ended, but the night had only begun. She sipped her tea thoughtfully, noting the subtle sounds carried through the manor, the soft creak of floorboards, the flutter of curtains in the evening breeze, a faint rustle that might have been nothing, or might have been everything. Dinner was a quiet affair in the dining room. The long table gleamed under the soft glow of the chandelier, the polished silver reflecting candlelight in gentle flickers. Mrs. Pembroke moved silently among the diners, placing dishes with a careful hand. Conversation was polite, yet tense. The new heir, young Edward Ashford, spoke little. his eyes darting occasionally toward the corners of the room where shadows seemed to linger a moment longer than they ought. Other villagers and minor guests exchanged small smiles, but Miss Marple noticed the slight hesitation in their speech, the brief pauses before answering questions, small windows into unspoken fears and concealed truths. Later, as night fell completely, Miss Marple retired to her room. The manor was hushed, yet alive with whispers of its own. Outside, winds stirred the bare branches, casting flickering shadows on the walls. She lay awake for a while, listening carefully. A soft creak came from the corridor, followed by a whisper so faint it could have been the imagination. Miss Marple's mind did not rush to fear. She was accustomed to listening to silence and finding meaning in it. The whispering continued, now accompanied by a faint tapping at a distant door, as though some unseen hand traced patterns against the wood. Miss Marple rose quietly, shawl wrapped tightly around her, and stepped into the hall. The cold air of the corridor brushed against her cheeks, carrying the faint scent of old wood and a trace of lavender from the morning room. She noticed small details that most would overlook: the faint scuff of a shoe on the polished floor, a slightly ajar door, a shadow that seemed to linger just a heartbeat too long. Each tiny clue was a thread waiting to be followed, and Miss Marple's mind worked quietly, weaving possibilities together with patience and precision. Returning to her room, she paused by the window once more. The moon cast a gentle silver glow over the manor grounds, illuminating the garden in a dreamlike haze. A soft whisper floated from below, drifting upward like a secret carried on the night air. Miss Marple closed her eyes briefly, letting the sound settle into her thoughts. She knew that every whisper had its origin, every rustle a reason, and that the night would reveal truths if she were patient enough to listen. She reflected on the manor itself, the heavy oak doors, the grand staircase, the countless rooms she had yet to explore. Each corner held memories, some long forgotten, some deliberately concealed. The air seemed thick with anticipation, and Miss Marple, far from anxious, felt a quiet thrill of curiosity. "There is a story here," she murmured to herself, "and I intend to uncover it, one careful step at a time." Finally, Miss Marple returned to her bed, settling beneath the thick quilt. The whispers faded into the gentle rhythm of her breathing, and the manor seemed to sigh with the night. Shadows played upon the walls, flickering like old memories, and somewhere in the distance, a faint door creaked closed. She allowed herself a small smile. Patience, she thought, always reveals the truth. And as sleep began to drift over her, she knew that the night had only just begun to share its secrets. Chapter 4. Village interviews and subtle red herrings. The morning sun broke through a thin layer of mist, casting delicate gold upon Elderwood. The village awoke gradually. Shutters creaked, chimney smoke spiraled into the sky, and the soft clatter of horse hooves echoed faintly along the cobblestones. Miss Marple, shawl wrapped snugly around her shoulders, stepped once more into the square. Her eyes moved carefully from face to face, noting the expressions of the villagers. There was a peculiar tension beneath the normal routine, a hesitancy in movement, a flicker of curiosity masked with civility. She first visited the bakery, a cozy shop filled with the warm aroma of bread and pastries. The baker, a middle-aged man with flour-dusted hands, greeted her politely, though his eyes betrayed unease. "I suppose you've heard something about the manor," he said, his voice low. "People talk, though some stories are better left untold." Miss Marple nodded gently. "Stories often hold clues, and clues lead to truth. Even a simple observation can reveal much." He paused, frowning slightly. "Well, last night I thought I heard a faint tapping, like a knock inside the manor, though no one entered or left. Perhaps the wind, or perhaps something else." Next, Miss Marple visited Mrs. Whittaker, the elderly widow who had lived in Elderwood all her life. The small cottage smelled of dried herbs and tea. "Oh, Miss Marple," she whispered, clutching her shawl, "you must be careful. That manor, it hides things people would rather you didn't notice. I've heard footsteps when no one walks, whispers when no one speaks, shadows when no candle shines." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Thank you, Mrs. Whittaker. Every detail, however strange, is valuable. Your observations may guide us." The village inn was her next stop. The innkeeper, polishing mugs behind the counter, offered a polite nod. "People say there's something about the manor that unsettles even the bravest," he said, avoiding her gaze. "I don't rightly know what it is, but things happen at night. Strange noises, doors opening, glimpses of shadows. Some villages whisper of secrets buried long ago. Miss Marple leaned slightly, observing the subtle hesitation in his voice. Every pause, every flicker of the eyes told her as much as spoken words. Returning to the manor, Miss Marple wandered through the frost-kissed gardens. The hedges glistened with ice, and the statues seemed almost alive in the pale light. She noted small disturbances, footprints partially covered by frost, a slightly tilted sundial, petals from a flower pressed against the garden wall, as if someone had brushed past in haste. Each tiny clue, she thought, was like a thread waiting to be followed. Patience and observation, she knew, would reveal the patterns that the village tried to conceal. As she paused by a small pond, she noticed a figure in the distance, a young man, tall and uneasy, watching from the edge of the garden. He seemed hesitant, glancing nervously toward the manor. Miss Marple approached slowly, offering her customary gentle smile. "Good morning," she said softly. "The garden is beautiful this time of year, isn't it?" He started, clearly startled, then nodded. "Yes, very beautiful." His eyes flicked nervously toward the manor once more. I should be going." Miss Marple noted the hesitation, the subtle fear in his voice. Some secrets, she realized, were only hinted at, and the whispers of the village carried far more than words alone. As evening settled, Miss Marple sat once more by the window of her room in Ashford Manor. The letter from the previous day lay on the table beside a notebook filled with observations, villagers' gestures, subtle changes in tone, mysterious footprints, and the strange behavior of the, quote, manor's occupants. She traced each detail slowly, letting them settle into her thoughts. "The threads are tangled, but they will reveal the pattern," she whispered to herself. "Patience and observation, and all will be revealed in time." Outside, the village settled into the hush of night, and the manor exhaled softly with the evening breeze. Somewhere, a distant clock chimed. The mystery was growing, layer by layer, and Miss Marple, ever watchful, was ready. Chapter 5. The Hare's Mysterious Death. The morning was colder than usual. Frost lined the edges of the windows, and a faint mist clung to the garden paths. Miss Marple, rising early as always, sensed the unusual stillness in the manor. Even the servants moved more quietly than usual, and a subtle tension lingered in the air. She paused by her window, the garden cloaked in silver frost, and allowed her gaze to wander across the manor grounds. Something felt unsettled, though nothing could yet be seen. A sudden, hurried knock echoed from the morning room. Mrs. Pembroke appeared at the doorway, her face pale. "Miss Marple, you must come quickly," she whispered, almost breathless. Following her swiftly, Miss Marple entered the study, where a small group of servants and the butler had gathered. There, on the Persian rug, lay young Edward Ashford, the heir of Ashford Manor. His eyes were closed, his face pale, and the stillness of his body seemed impossibly unnatural in the warmth of the room. Miss Marple knelt gently beside him, her fingers lightly resting on his wrist. No pulse. Yet no panic gripped her. She studied the scene carefully, the placement of his body, the slight tilt of the chair he had been seated upon, the faint ink stain on the papers beside him. Every detail mattered. Miss Marple rose, her gaze sweeping the room with methodical calm. The study was tidy, but subtle disturbances revealed more than appearances suggested. A chair slightly pushed aside, the corner of a letter peeking from under the rug. Faint footprints in the dust along the windowsill, small threads waiting to be followed. She noticed, too, a window slightly ajar, letting in a cold draft that ruffled the curtains. On the desk, a cup of tea remained mostly untouched, the steam curling softly into the air. Nothing in this room seemed accidental, yet everything demanded careful consideration. Miss Marple's mind worked quietly, assembling possibilities. Who would wish harm upon Edward Ashford? Was it an intruder, or someone from within the household? Or perhaps a secret buried long ago that had finally reached the present? Her eyes fell upon the mysterious letter she had received days before, now lying in her notebook. The words haunted her. "The past has returned. Watch closely and trust no one completely." She felt a chill, but remained composed. Each small clue, each subtle gesture observed in the village and manor would guide her toward understanding. Miss Marple turned to the gathered servants, her tone gentle yet probing. "Tell me what you observed last night. No detail is too small, no observation too trivial." One by one they recounted faint sounds, the creak of floorboards, whispers that seemed to pass without source, doors moving on their own. Their faces were anxious, yet Miss Marple sensed that not all details were offered voluntarily. Some were carefully concealed, held back by fear or hesitation. She listened, silent and attentive, making careful notes of each word, each glance, each small hesitation. The truth, she knew, often hid in the spaces between words. Miss Marple moved through the manor slowly, retracing Edward's steps from the previous evening. She noted small inconsistencies, a book misplaced on the shelf, a candle that had burned unusually low, the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume lingering in the hallway. These seemingly trivial details were like threads in a larger tapestry, some leading to truth, others to misdirection. She allowed each to settle in her mind, knowing that patience would reveal which were significant and which were mere distractions. As dusk fell, Miss Marple returned to her room, the manor now enveloped in shadows. She sat by the window, notebook open, reviewing her observations. Every whisper, every pause in conversation, every subtle gesture of the villagers or servants, each had meaning. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow on the walls. But outside, the night carried secrets in its silence. Miss Marple felt the pulse of the manor, the quiet heartbeat of mystery, and allowed herself a small, patient smile. "This is only the beginning," she murmured softly. "The threads are tangled, but the pattern will emerge." Chapter 6. Hidden Passages and Secret Observations. The morning after Edward Ashwood's death, the manor seemed heavier, as if the walls themselves carried the weight of unspoken secrets. Miss Marple, shawl tightly draped over her shoulders, moved carefully through the long corridors. She noticed details she had previously overlooked. A faint draft from a section of wall, a floorboard slightly raised, a shadow that shifted oddly with the morning light. Her fingers traced the smooth banister of the grand staircase, and her mind pieced together the subtle hints. Doors that squeaked too late, corridors that echoed differently, and the faint smell of old paper lingering near a wall panel. Behind a faded tapestry in the library, Miss Marple noticed a narrow seam in the wall. Pressing gently, she felt the panel give way slightly under her touch. The faint outline of a hidden door emerged, its presence previously masked by shadows and the intricate patterns of the wallpaper. Carefully, she pushed it open. A narrow, dust-filled corridor stretched into darkness, faintly smelling of aged wood and old secrets. Miss Marple's heart, calm yet alert, recognized that this was a thread leading deeper into the manor's hidden past. She stepped into the passageway, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. The walls were lined with old portraits, their eyes seeming to follow her silently. Each step revealed subtle signs of activity, a footprint in the dust, a slight smear on the wooden floor, a faint indentation where something had been pressed against the wall. Miss Marple paused, noting that this passage had clearly been used recently. Despite its concealment, the manor, she realized, held not just physical secrets, but the hidden movements of those who sought to protect or conceal them. At the end of the passage, Miss Marple discovered a small, hidden study. The room was lined with shelves of books, stacks of papers, and a desk scattered with letters. Most were addressed to Edward Ashwood, but some bore the same unfamiliar crest as the mysterious letter she had received days before. Sitting at the desk, she carefully opened the letters, letting her eyes take in each word slowly. References to long-forgotten disputes, cryptic warnings, and veiled threats painted a picture of a family secret that had festered quietly, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Returning to the main halls, Miss Marple's attention was drawn to the subtle behaviors of the household staff. A servant lingered too long near the dining room door, glancing nervously down the corridor. Another adjusted a painting repeatedly, as if to obscure a detail. Miss Marple did not confront them immediately. She observed quietly, allowing her mind to weave together the threads of behavior and circumstance. Every glance, every hesitation, every carefully avoided eye contact carried meaning for those who knew how to watch. As evening settled, Miss Marple once again found herself in the morning room, notebook open and pen in hand. The manor was cloaked in shadows, the flickering light of the fireplace casting gentle shapes on the walls. She reviewed her observations, hidden passages, mysterious letters, the unusual behaviors of the staff, and the subtle disturbances she had noticed. The threads of the mystery were complex, tangled, but she felt certain that the pattern would emerge. Patience, careful observation, and quiet reasoning would reveal the truth, piece by piece. Before retiring, Miss Marple placed the letters and notes carefully on her desk. She took a slow, measured breath and allowed herself a small, thoughtful smile. The manor held its secrets tightly, but it had also revealed enough to guide her next steps. Outside, the night was still yet alive with subtle sounds, the distant howl of a dog, the gentle rustle of trees, and the whisper of wind through the garden. She knew that the night would continue to share its secrets, slowly, quietly, for those willing to listen. Chapter 7: Confrontations and Revealed Secrets. The manor was unusually quiet that afternoon. Miss Marple moved through the corridors with deliberate calm, noting the subtle signs of tension in the household. The servants' hurried glances, the way the housekeeper paused mid-task, the faint tightening of muscles when anyone approached her, all small signals that the air was charged with fear and hidden truths. She allowed herself a quiet smile. Patience, she knew, would unravel the mystery more effectively than confrontation. Still, some truths demanded careful questioning, and she intended to begin. Miss Marple found Mrs. Pembroke arranging silverware in the dining room. "Mrs. Pembroke," she began softly, "I know this is a difficult time, but I must ask, have you noticed anything unusual lately? Any small detail that seemed odd?" The housekeeper hesitated, then sighed. "Well, there is one thing. I've seen someone moving in the corridors at night, though I know all the staff were in their rooms, and there's the matter of the old chest in the east wing. It was moved slightly, though I cannot imagine who would have dared." Miss Marple nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you. Every detail, no matter how small, is important." Later, she spoke with the young gardener who had been tending the frost-covered gardens. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke. I may have seen something," he admitted. "Last night near the east wing, I heard voices. They were whispering, but I couldn't make out the words. Then I saw shadows moving near the old study. I thought it best to say nothing." Miss Marple listened intently, noting the subtle fear in his tone and the direction of his gaze. Each confession, each hesitation, added another thread to the intricate tapestry of the mystery. Returning to the library, Miss Marple's eyes were drawn to a faintly protruding book on the shelf. Carefully pulling it forward, she discovered a hidden letter tucked behind it. The paper was aged and yellowed, the ink faded but legible. The letter revealed a long-standing dispute among the Ashwood family, hints of jealousy, and vague warnings about consequences for those who uncovered the family's secrets. Miss Marple read slowly, absorbing every word, every nuance. In the evening, Miss Marple called the household together in the main hall. The fire glowed softly, casting flickering shadows across the walls. "Someone among us knows more than they have admitted," she said calmly, her eyes scanning the room. "The manor has whispered its secrets, and I have listened carefully. It is time to speak honestly." A maid shifted nervously, glancing at the others. Finally, she spoke. I moved the chest last night. I did not mean any harm. I only wished to see if it contained the old letters rumoured in the village. I did not know of Edward's death until this morning." Miss Marple nodded gently. "Thank you. That is an important truth. There's more yet to uncover, but honesty now will help us understand the full story." One by one, Miss Marple observed the minor characters piecing together their hidden motives. The innkeeper had long concealed resentment toward the Ashfords. The widow had guarded knowledge of a family feud spanning generations. Even the gardener carried unspoken fear of the manor's influence. Each subtle revelation, though small, added layers to the overarching mystery. Miss Marple's mind worked quietly, assembling the fragments into a pattern that had begun to emerge. As night fell, Miss Marple sat by the window in her room, the manor enveloped in a quiet, watchful darkness. She reviewed her notes and observations, hidden passages, whispered warnings, subtle gestures, and confessions. Each piece formed a delicate mosaic pointing toward the truth. Outside, the wind sighed through the trees and the distant hoot of an owl punctuated the stillness. The manor, seemingly silent, held countless secrets, each waiting for her patient attention. Miss Marple sipped her tea slowly. "The night has spoken," she murmured, "and soon the truth will follow." Chapter 8. The final revelation. The evening had grown deep, and the manor was bathed in a soft, golden glow from the fireplaces. Miss Marple stood in the centre of the main hall, her eyes calm, her posture composed. The household and a few villagers had been summoned, each carrying a mixture of curiosity, apprehension, and lingering fear. "The time has come," she said softly, her voice gentle but precise. "The manor has whispered its secrets, and now they must be spoken aloud. Every small detail, every gesture, every hidden word has led us here. Miss Marple began slowly, recounting the events that had transpired over the past week. She described Edward's last movements, the unusual behavior of the staff, and the mysterious letters she had discovered. She spoke of the hidden passage behind the library tapestry, the subtle disturbances in the corridors, and the whispered conversations in the village. Each detail was carefully placed, as though weaving a delicate tapestry of truth from fragments of shadow and rumor. The listeners leaned forward, their attention captured by the quiet power of her reasoning. Finally, Miss Marple's gaze rested on one of the household members, the subtle tension in the room palpable. "It is not often that malice wears such a carefully constructed mask," she said. "Yet even the most careful disguise cannot hide the truth entirely. The one who sought to manipulate the events of this manner was—" She paused briefly, letting the weight of anticipation settle. "Someone who believed their family secrets must remain hidden at any cost. Every small detail, from the placement of the chest to the letters hidden behind the bookshelf, points to a single truth." The room remained silent, each face reflecting a mixture of fear, disbelief, and fascination. Miss Marple explained the motive with clarity and precision: jealousy, fear of exposure, and a desire to control the legacy of Ashford Manor. She detailed the small actions that had appeared trivial but were in fact deliberate: the subtle movements of objects, the whispers in the corridors, the careful manipulation of villagers' perceptions. Her words painted a vivid picture of the sequence of events, revealing how Edward had been caught in the web of old resentments and hidden ambitions. She emphasized that the manor itself, with its quiet corridors and secret passages, had not acted alone. Human nature had been the driving force behind every subtle disturbance. One by one, the household members admitted their small deceptions, the lies and half-truths they had carried. Some sought to protect others, some to conceal their own fears, but each confession fit into the intricate puzzle that Miss Marple had slowly pieced together. The guilty party, realizing that concealment was no longer possible, spoke softly, explaining their actions and the reasons behind them. The room remained quiet, the only sounds the gentle crackle of the fire and the whispering wind outside. Once the confessions had been heard, Miss Marple allowed herself a small, reflective sigh. She turned her gaze to the flickering flames of the fireplace. "Human nature," she said softly, "often seeks to hide what is inconvenient, frightening, or shameful. Yet patience, observation, and quiet reasoning reveal the truth, even when shadows seem to dominate the light." The villagers and household members listened, the tension gradually lifting as understanding and relief replaced fear. As the night deepened, the manor settled into a tranquil calm. Windows glimmered with moonlight, the gardens were bathed in silver, and even the distant village seemed hushed in quiet reflection. Miss Marple moved slowly to her room, carrying her notebook of observations and letters, the puzzle now complete. She placed the notes carefully on her desk, took a deep breath, and allowed herself a small smile. The manor, for now, was at peace, and the mysteries that had stirred its walls had been laid bare through patience, keen observation, and quiet understanding. Miss Marple settled into bed beneath the thick quilt, the moonlight casting soft patterns on the walls. Outside, the manor exhaled quietly, its whispers of the past now at rest. She closed her eyes slowly, allowing the calm of resolution to fill the room. The night carried with it a gentle sense of closure. The mysteries of Ashford Manor resolved, and the village of Elderwood returned to its quiet, watchful serenity. Chapter 9. The Epilogue. Calm after the storm. The first light of dawn crept softly over Elderwood, spilling gold across the frost-tipped rooftops. The village stirred gradually, but the air felt lighter now, as though a long-held tension had finally lifted. Miss Marple walked slowly through the square, observing the villagers returning to their routines. The baker arranged fresh bread in the shop window, smiling faintly as he nodded to her. The widow tended her garden, humming softly to herself. Even the innkeeper moved with a lighter step, adjusting the shutters with a sense of ease he had not known for weeks. Ashford Manor, too, seemed to breathe more freely. The corridors, once heavy with whispered secrets, now felt open and welcoming. Mrs. Pembroke moved with her usual diligence, but with a calmer rhythm, and the staff carried out their tasks without the tension that had shadowed their every step. Miss Marple took a slow walk through the halls, noting the subtle signs of care restored, curtains properly adjusted, floors polished, and flowers replaced in their vases. The manor had survived its turbulence, and now its elegance seemed to shine quietly in the morning light. Through the day, the village returned to its gentle routines. Children played in the square, their laughter ringing clearly. Villagers greeted each other with warm smiles, exchanging words that carried less fear and more trust. Miss Marple observed quietly, noting the subtle recovery of human nature once shadows had been lifted. Even small gestures, the innkeeper offering extra bread, the widow sharing herbs from her garden, spoke of a community mending itself. And yet in Miss Marple's eyes the lessons of the past lingered, reminders that vigilance, kindness, and observation could never truly be abandoned. Later that evening, Miss Marple returned to her room, placing the notebook and letters carefully on the desk. She gazed out the window at the manor gardens, now bathed in the soft glow of twilight. She reflected on the events that had unfolded, the hidden passages, the whispered secrets, the subtle gestures of fear and deception. Patience, careful reasoning, and quiet observation had unveiled the truth, bringing peace to the manor and the village alike. Miss Marple took quiet satisfaction in the resolution of minor arcs. The young gardener, once fearful, now moved freely through the gardens with pride. The maid who had confessed her part felt relief in honesty. Even the innkeeper and widow carried a renewed sense of community. Each life touched by the events at Ashford Manor had found a small measure of calm and understanding. And as Miss Marple observed, she smiled quietly, knowing that the threads of kindness, patience, and subtle observation had woven the most enduring resolution of all. Night settled gently over the manor, a blanket of silver moonlight illuminating the gardens and reflecting softly off the windows. The house was quiet, yet alive in a calm, serene way. Miss Marple lit a single candle by her bedside, watching the flame dance softly. The manor, with all its whispers and hidden secrets, had been tamed by understanding and patience. Outside, the village of Elderwood lay peacefully, its long-held tensions finally eased. Miss Marple lay beneath the quilt, the quiet of the night enveloping her like a soft embrace. She reflected on human nature, the shadows of fear and secrecy, the glimmers of honesty and courage, and the delicate balance between observation and compassion. The world, she whispered softly, is full of stories waiting to be uncovered. Patience, kindness, and careful attention reveal truths that otherwise remain hidden, and with each story the world grows a little brighter, a little wiser. With that, she closed her eyes, the manor resting in the gentle hush of night, and Elderwood slept peacefully, carrying with it the soft legacy of secrets revealed and hearts unburdened.